Welcome to Vibrant Voices podcast with your host, Charles Allen. Okay, everyone, welcome to the show. Welcome to Vibrant Voices. Today we have a special guest, documentary filmmaker, Dr. Christopher Odom. Doctor, welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Charles. I really appreciate being here.
Cool, cool. So we're going to talk today about your documentary. I think the name of it is Justice for George Floyd, The Tipping Point, correct?
Yes, justice for George Floyd, the tipping point, with a question mark.
Okay. So I want to talk more about the documentary, and I also know it's about to premiere, or is it already on Tubi?
Yeah, yes, the documentary actually is on Tubi, and I'm glad you brought that up because I have something I'd like to plug. The documentary is screening on Tubi as part of the HBCU First Look Film Festival tour. It's a special collection from the First Look Film Festival. I began my college journey at Morehouse, but ended up finishing my college journey when I did my dissertation at the University of Central Florida, which is where I produced this documentary as part of my dissertation of the same name. It was a three-part dissertation with a 62,000 word traditional paper, some generative, artistic based, code based scholarship where I actually got to tinker with code and make some really heady stuff that was in different academic conferences. And then there was this 35-minute documentary that kind of summed up all of my research. And being that I had gone to an HBCU and I had done my documentary recently as part of my doctoral research, the HBC First Look Film Festival was generous enough to offer me the opportunity to participate in the 2B collection. I didn't tour with them at the film festival, and they're going around to different colleges, but this is my opportunity to stay connected. I'm a big, strong supporter of HBCUs. My family has a rich HBCU history. My grandfather was a dean. My grandmother was a teacher. A lot of my family has gone to many of the HBCUs, but that's a little bit about my family background and what this documentary is sort of about. Would you like to ask me a question, or would you like me
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
dig in a little deeper?
I'd like you to go a little deeper, but how did they find out about your film and contact you? How did the HBC Touring Film Festival find out about Justice for George Floyd?
I originally had submitted to the film festival, and they did not include me in the actual festival, because I was a little older. And, I began at Morehouse, didn't finish at Morehouse. But when the Tubi opportunity came, they remembered me and offered me the chance to participate, and I'm so grateful for that. The HBCU First Look Film Festival, like the Our Vision Caribbean and Latino Film Festival, gives independent and emerging filmmakers a chance to be heard. Sometimes people have been around a while, but they still haven't actually had that opportunity to build an audience, and it's festivals like yours and the HBC First Look Film Festival tour that gives people that opportunity to build that audience and really get their messages and their stories out to the public.
Okay. Um, is the screening on Tubi, how long is it going to last? Is there a specific time
I
or
believe it's going to be there for around 90 days. If it does very well, they might keep it longer, but it's going to be there around 90 days. It's screening now. I'll share a link with you that you can share with your audience where people could see my film, but just don't watch my film. Watch all of the films in the HBCU First Look Film Festival. I'll give you a link that can take you directly to the collection, and so that you can see everything. There's so many wonderful films, so many rich, diverse voices yearning to be heard.
oh, I think that's magnificent, my friend. I think that's really good. that people get an opportunity to see these young college student films and see upcoming filmmakers who's going to be the next Ryan Coogler, who knows, you know. So that's really great. So I want to ask you a little bit more about the documentary. Tell me, I know you had tour with it. What is your experience like touring with the film, sending it to different film festivals? And could you tell us how it was received in those film festivals?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned touring with the film. So after I completed the film and I began submitting it to independent festivals, many of them diverse and genre based, for about a year and a half, we screened worldwide and ended up uh, garnering or earning around 38 honors, awards, and screenings. I was blown away. I've never had that many honors, awards, and screenings for a singular work. It was well received. People still wanted to talk about George Floyd, and it's a little bit different because this was part of my dissertation. My film looks at the Justice for George Floyd protest, but through the lens of social media and visual narrative. And it seeks to provide strategies that social movements could use to sort of advance the aims of a social movement. And then it also looks like, why did some people support justice for George Floyd and why some people didn't? And in the film, and as well as in my actual dissertation, I actually look at what's culture. And culture is sort of like a language in and of itself. I studied visual semiotics, which is just a fancy way to say that a picture or word has other meanings associated it throughout culture. And as you go from culture to culture, the same image doesn't necessarily tell the same story, you know, as much as what George Floyd meant to me and what Derek Chauvin did to him meant to me. It was very interesting that that imagery did not necessarily elucidate the same stories in other cultures. And so when you learn to speak culture and you become bicultural, then you can learn to really communicate and really learn to understand people. My family has lived in Nashville for over 30 years, and it's interesting. You'll see a guy in a big, you know, truck with the big tires and the gun rack and the Confederate flag. And what music is he listening to? You know, is it Taylor Swift? You know, is it Blake Snyder? No, it's Snoop Dogg. And you're like, huh? Because different, you know, to me, the Confederate flag means slavery. It means, you know, the Confederacy. But honestly, to many people in the red states, the Confederate flag just means, you know, honor, pride. You know, as strange as that sounds to me in my culture, that's what it means to them. And that's why they're listening to Snoop Dogg, because that symbol doesn't mean the same thing in their culture. I know it's as crazy as it sounds, but then when if you can kind of let your guard down and you begin to speak with people and you realize we're really all a lot more similar than we all different. And if all else fails, start simple. Do you like pizza? And yeah, I like pizza. That's a great place to start. And so in this documentary, you know, I look at culture and then I suggest strategies that social movements can use to get the word out, and also looks at technology, how technology and emerging technology can be used to advance, you know, the aims of a social movement for good.
I mean, what you just tell me, especially the part with, you know, folks with the Confederate flag and driving in the pickup truck and, you know, listening to Snoop Dogg, is the disconnect is just, whoo, it's just,
As a young man, when I had left Morehouse and I was in Nashville and I got a job at this place that got people credit cards, The owners, they had the truck, they had the tires, they had the gun rack, they had the flag. One of the best jobs I ever had. Some of the nicest, loving, caring, supportive people I had ever met. It was you got to learn to speak culture and understand, what it means to you. It doesn't mean that to them.
Yeah, it's I'm kind of finding it hard to get to that point because we talked about, everybody knows about what the Confederate flag means to Black folks in America, and so it's kind of hard for me to make that connect that, connect that where it doesn't mean to them, it means something else. I mean, people talk about that. It's in the
So to
atmosphere.
give you another example of speaking culture, Dr. Odom has done a lot of things. I used to host an aviation news program. Coming up on today's episode of Air Report Unlimited, SpaceX plans. So I would go to like the major air shows like Oshkosh. And a lot of people in aviation are conservative and red. And then, after a day's hard work, when they're sitting around, I'd say, okay, sell me, on conservatism. And what I found out was the things that they were focused on were not the same things I was focused on. It was just completely different. What I thought they were talking about and what they thought I was talking about were totally different. Well, for one, it was an aviation event. They were really focused on aviation, but they were really focused on, passing laws that help the little guy, while I was really focused on stopping Super Mega Corp from abusing the system. And what happens is when you're trying to stop Super Global Megacorp from abusing the system, and it costs two, three, four, $5 million in test and application fees to put a new knob in your cockpit, then you realize this is crushing the little guy. I never thought about it like that before. I was just trying to stop the big bad wolf. I had no idea it was crushing the little guy.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, how things could be different from a different perspective, a person's different perspective. Mike, have a question for you. How do you think the George Floyd situation and what's going on now in Minnesota, how do we connect that? How do we connect those two stories, and how do you think they intersect with each other?
I'm glad you brought that up because I was working on this documentary for a while, and by the time it takes so long to do something, it takes a while to do your dissertation. By the time I finished my dissertation and I finished the documentary, Derek Chauvin trial was over. He had been convicted, and he went to jail, and it was like the world got that Pyrrhic victory that they were looking for. It was a cathartic release. And it was kind of like, oh, well, justice for George Floyd. I mean, that was yesterday's news. And then came the Trump administration when we're making sure everybody has a chance to participate was no longer something considered valuable. And so then it was like justice for George Floyd, the tipping point was really dead. And then it just became so dead, dead, dead. We were experiencing what's called backlash. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We talk about backlash in the documentary and in my dissertation. And then all of a sudden, it's like it's George Floyd again. And we have the stuff going on with ICE. And they're even back in Minnesota. What are they doing back in Minnesota? Megan Nicole Good, or I'm sorry, Renee Nicole Good was killed 4 blocks from where George Floyd was killed. 4 blocks right down the street from George Floyd Square. And then suddenly the unthinkable had happened. It was like it's George Floyd all over again because the Trump administration was slamming down the iron fist. And so now, if you go to Tubi and you pull up Justice for George Floyd and you look at some of the images, you might think, oh, is this about ICE? So it suddenly became relevant again. But what backlash means in an academic sense is when a social movement is perceived to have gains, whether real or not, that can frighten certain groups. And then there's this backlash to stamp it out, even though it might not have really achieved the gains that they think it achieved. And so we are in a season of backlash. And when we saw how bad that was in Minnesota, when Don Lemon got arrested and there were two other people got arrested, I got scared because two of the people that also got arrested that day, I had reached out to in Minneapolis and had communicated with for my documentary. And I was like, oh my God, this is getting close. Am I going to get arrested? What's going on here? What kind of country is this? It really freaked me out. And so it's strange how everything is connected and can just come back full circle.
I mean, to me, it's mind blowing. But do you think, um, would you say America gained? I know you talked about the black backlash, but do you think they gain any sort of insight into policing in America?
You mean from the current situation in
Yeah.
Minnesota?
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think we've learned anything new, but we did see accents, body cams, body cams. If the police or ICE, law enforcement are doing what they're supposed to be doing, if the protesters are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, the body cam is the best friend of law enforcement. If law enforcement is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then the body cam is, their worst enemy. And so, what we saw in Minnesota definitely does accent body cams. In terms of social movements, no matter the language and the verbiage coming out of the administration, we saw that when people come together and stand as one, nobody can stand against you. And the administration does look at the polls. They do listen to people behind closed doors. They do listen to their voters, and it's just not what people wanted. And the administration has found a graceful way to begin their exit and sort of calm things down. But they're just going to go someplace else and crank things up. But yeah, you've got to get out there. I can't say I'm brave enough to get out there and risk my life and be tear gassed and beaten and arrested and have my passport destroyed. I can't say I'm that brave, but I take my hat off to those people who are that brave. But when you come together, just nothing can stand against you. There's just nothing that can stand against you. The system will cave. Power is not real. Power requires the person with the power. It requires the person without the power to agree to work with the power. But if the police don't agree, the military doesn't agree, the judges don't agree, the people don't agree, you don't have any power. Power is something that's given. It's not really something that's taken. And when people wake up and say, um, you can stop any dictator, any authoritarian leader, any bad person. There's nothing more powerful, than working together as one.
That's when the world changes. Huh? Okay, so let's go back to the documentary, and I want to stay focused. I don't want to get too deep into politics, although the nature of the documentary is about politics, somewhat, but I want to keep this on the sort of the experience you had with, creating this documentary, taking it out on the road. What would you say was your best experience showing this film, and what did you realize that you learned because you made this film?
Uh, to be honest, I did go out with the documentary on the world on the road. I even went up to Toronto. Um, while I was on the road with the documentary, I was in several, African American film festivals, and a lot of them, if you're a filmmaker, they have, additional activities for you, and they gave us like black history tours of the local communities. And I learned so much about Black history in these communities that I never knew before, like Wilmington, North Carolina, which is a very charming small city, used to be the biggest city in all of North Carolina until they did a Rosewood. And and what they did not understand was that the Black community that was thriving was driving the entire economy of Wilmington, North Carolina. And when they stamped it out, the whole thing collapsed. Same thing happened in St. Petersburg, Florida, during the Great Depression. People were killing themselves, but then they were like, people living it up on the Black side of town, and people started wandering and partying and hanging out there. And there were some folk that didn't like that, and they just crushed it out. But it's the best part of the documentary tour experience was actually learning more about Black history and what happened in some of these other areas. I've got to mention something else from Wilmington, North Carolina. There was like no Black hospital, and they wouldn't allow white doctors to work on people of color. And so there was, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people with no health care at all. And someone set out to create a Black hospital, and they tried to bring in Black doctors from across the country. And they were like, I don't know, Wilmington, North Carolina, how many patients do you have? And he said 10,000. He didn't have any problem getting doctors and nurses to come. And then it was a thriving healthcare industry for people of color. And then eventually the white hospitals and doctors caught on. Oh, this is money.
As they would say, until until it was thriving until somebody figured out that they can make more money having blacks coming to their side of town. Um, that's a lesson that we need to um, think about carefully and see. Anyway, I'm not gonna. I just want to stay on task, and the task is justice for George Floyd. So where do you see now that you're on 2B? Where do you hope to go with the film? Is there life after 2B, or are you planning to what are the plans for the film?
After its initial 90-day run on Tubi, I'm working with Film Hub to actually continue to release it through additional streaming services. As a filmmaker, it's 2026, and I'm a huge fan of streaming. Netflix is about to become the biggest studio. I'm a huge fan of streaming and emerging technologies, especially when it comes to distributing our media and our art.
So do you think traditional filmmaking is over? I mean, I'm glad you bring that up. I just really quick, again, still remaining on task, but what do you think? You say you love streaming, and are you embracing AI filmmaking? I saw something out of China that's driving everybody's crazy, where it says we Hollywood is over, where the Chinese release um, a film of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise fighting, and it looks so realistic. The first thing said, first word out of Hollywood, we're done. I mean, what do you see filmmaking going?
Well, the technology is moving fast. You shouldn't fear technology. Well, first of all, the clip with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise was exciting because it is Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. If it wasn't Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, it actually would not have been a news story. And so we still need people to be people and people that people can meet in person. And so traditional filmmaking is not going away, but it doesn't inhabit the space that it once did inhabit, but it's evolved. Like during COVID in China, vertical dramas became a $6 billion industry. If you're a young filmmaker now and you want to tell narrative scripted stories, I would say get into vertical dramas on TikTok. You do about 31.5 minute episodes. It's basically a soap opera. You shoot it on like a DSLR camera and portrait that's what the young people watch it on. And it's like $19 to get a subscription to one season. And, multi-billion-dollar industry. Hollywood has gone vertical drama crazy right now. A whole bunch of companies just sprung up in LA. Some of them are redubbing the Chinese vertical dramas, and some of them are making their own. If you want to be a billionaire, vertical dramas, that's where you need to be today.
I seen that SAG is also getting into the vertical dramas. That you if you do a vertical drama, you can get your SAG card. I mean, and it's not as strenuous as doing a feature. I mean, they're giving you breaks, filmmakers, breaks to have them to keep the union strong, because, like you said, the um, the future, I don't know if I can say that if the future is verticals. But along with that, my question, what I really wanted to ask when I said traditional filmmakers and you were talking about streaming, what about a theatrical release? Do you think the belief that you had to get a theatrical release to be a true filmmaker, or is it
That
just,
that 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 was gone years ago. Theatrical is you're gonna lose money on a theatrical release. Theatrical release is commercial. You want to go back to the art house platform release in just a few screens. What happens is we focus on the rarities and the exceptions, not the rules. You go, well, Avatar made 1 billion, Batman made 1 billion, Avengers made 1 billion. But that's two or three projects. Not all the projects aren't making $1 billion. There's just not as many people go to the theater. Not as many people watch it at home. But what most people do is consume content right here on their phone. And it's not even like this. It's in portrait mode. That's it. You have to understand, where has the audience gone, and that's where the audience has gone. When I go home to visit my dad, he's on his TV and he's just doing YouTube and he's just clicking, click, click, click. He's making decisions fast. I get excited. I was like, oh my god, look how fast he's making decisions. He's just watching anything. I'm going to be rich.
nice, nice, nice. All right, Chris. So we this was a very interesting conversation. I'm glad that you hopped on here and give us an update on what you're doing, and how you want to continue to push the films on other streaming platforms. Through Film Hub, is it called? That's like an aggregator, correct?
Yeah, it's a distributor for streaming services only, and it's an easy way, for people to get There's other places you can go. Film Hub is a popular one. They're doing a good thing. It gives you an opportunity to find an audience.
I know what some filmmakers want to know, and I think do you feel that you keep using the word billionaire, but do you really feel that, like, you can make some money with justice for George Floyd, the tipping point?
So I have Dr. Odom has a thing called FFPPP, your front facing public professional persona. So no, justice for George Floyd is not a money grab, but when you do things on brand, it does indirectly support your efforts to try and do things directly. It's an extension of your brand. When somebody looks you up online, they can click a button. They go, oh, wow, this is interesting. Just, okay, I know what he's all about. Yeah, justice for George Floyd isn't about making money. It's about continuing to tell stories. It's about staying relevant. It's about giving back to society. And in reward, I do get to increase my profile and have a few more meetings, talk to some interesting people.
Cool, cool. All right, Chris, Dr. Odom, thank you for coming on here. I know this is a quick podcast, but we wanted to share because you used to be a host of the first incarnation of this podcast.
Yes.
So it's always a good that folks like say, okay, that's where Dr. Odom is at, and
It's great to come back home, as Halle Berry said as Queen. Home was where you loved.
All right, my friend. Thanks for hopping on, and definitely send that link that I can share it with our audience, and so they can watch the film and get a good understanding of that moment in history, what happened to George Floyd.
I'll send that out right away because I'm getting on a plane and globe trekking tomorrow, so I need to do that while I can.
Okay, cool. Thank you, my friend. And let's do you want to give any of your socials that people maybe if they want to get in contact with you that you might want to share with us?
If you want to get in contact with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Christopher C. Odom, or go to my academic website, cv.christopherodom.com.
All right, cool. Thank you, sir. And thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you talk about this and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please like and subscribe. This podcast has been brought to you by All Vision Caribbean Latino Film Festival.